I'm going to turn to someone who's really an expert on the Red Hook community and what this new ferry service will mean to it. But first, I want to speak about something very important that's happening this week. It's going to have a huge impact on New York City and on people all over the country, all over the globe. Deeply distressed by the word that President Trump may withdraw the United States from the Paris Climate Change Accord. This would be horribly destructive to the Earth and horribly destructive for New York City. I want to remind everyone that here in Red Hook, we saw the destructive power of nature in the age of climate change. I was here in the days after Hurricane Sandy. Carlos remembers well, he was there too, that we saw this community disrupted so tremendously by something that was directly affected by climate change. There's no question about it. Hurricane Sandy, a nor'easter, all that occurred in that superstorm was because of climate change. We've already borne the brunt here in New York City. It's only going to get worse if something is not done quickly to reverse the course the Earth is on. The Paris Accord was the biggest step forward we've taken in many, many years. And it's unconscionable for the President of the United States to step away from it, and from what we're hearing, against the advice of some of his most senior advisors, let alone against the advice of scientists all over this country. So this is a dagger aimed straight at the heart of New York City. We have to understand that if climate change is not addressed, one of the greatest coastal cities on the Earth will be increasingly threatened. And it's very painful to reflect the fact that Donald Trump is from New York City. He should know better. He should know that what he is thinking of doing would hurt his hometown more than almost any place else, because we're an entirely coastal city. So it makes no sense. It's dangerous. And we in New York City are going to have to take matters into our own hands. And by the way, that's what cities all over the country and all over the world are going to do. That's what states and provinces are doing. It shouldn't be this way, but it's what's necessary. We have to take matters into our own hands when it comes to climate change. We plan later this week to sign an executive order maintaining New York City's commitment to the Paris Agreement. And we will partner with cities big and small around the country to support them in doing the same. It's obvious that when our federal government fails us, local governments have to step up. And if cities and towns and counties and states all over the country step up and agree to abide by the Paris Agreement, we can forestall the worst. We can stop what President Trump may be about to do from having a devastating effect on our own people. It's a sad state of affairs when localities have to do what the federal government should be doing, but we're prepared to do that. And that's going to be an important part of what we do this week as we wait for the president's final word. We saw another statement today that suggested he's wavering, but unfortunately, based on everything else we've heard him say in his campaign and since, I fear the worst, and therefore we will be ready to act. We'll take questions on that when we go into the Q&A. But now let me go back to the original plan and have Lily Marshall join us. Oh, you may not need the extra height. You're pretty tall.
How are you? Good morning, everyone. I am Ms. Marshall, the Resident Association President for Red Hook West, and I'm also the COP Chair for entire Brooklyn South Developments. It is an honor for me to introduce our mayor on this beautiful day. This is a good week for Red Hook. I love Red Hook because I've been here since January 1966. I raised my children here. And this is a wonderful place to live. We have a new ferry and new options for transit at a good price, which we can afford. Actually, it's the same price you're already paying for the buses and subways. For years, we have been fighting for more and better transportation for this community. Red Hook is actually cut off by highways, and when Sandy came along, it became worse. The change today makes life so much easier for us. Tomorrow, a new service starts for the people of Red Hook houses and the community at large. We will be able to get to more jobs. Children will get to schools more easily and in less time. People as a whole can get to their doctors. We can shop in more places. Something we don't have also in Red Hook are places to shop. These ferries aren't for the wealthy or for the tourists. They are for us people. I'm proud to introduce our mayor, Mr. Bill de Blasio. Let us give him a hearty welcome and thank you for being our mayor, Mr. de Blasio.
Thank you so much, Lily. Lily, I want to thank you. You have a tough job. You have to look out for the residents of one of the biggest public housing developments in all of New York City. And I know that your development's been through a lot because of Sandy and for many years before, not always getting the support it deserved. But you have stood strong and you have helped the Red Hook community to keep moving forward. I want to thank you. Let's give Lily a big round of applause. So when I was first in public office as a school board member here in District 15 in Brooklyn, I represented the Red Hook community. And I saw firsthand the decades of unfairness that affected Red Hook. Red Hook has not been treated fairly over many, many years. Red Hook didn't have what a lot of other communities had. Lily just said there's not enough places to shop. There's not a way to get around easily. People in Red Hook often felt isolated. And it occurred to many people in Red Hook that their isolation was directly connected to their economic status and their race. That's the history, unfortunately, of too many places in New York City. That if you had resources, you had options. If you didn't, you were left out. This is part of evening up the score. This is part of creating more fairness in New York City to ensure that people in Red Hook have a way to get every place they need to go just as easily as people in more advantaged communities. And this ferry service is going to make a big difference for people in this community. Now, it begins tomorrow at 6:30 a.m. So a big step forward for Red Hook and for communities all over South Brooklyn. This is something that has been talked about for years, dreamed about for years, and now it is finally happening. It will be a reality. Residents of this community will finally have the access they deserve to everything this city has to offer. I have to tell you, people understood when they didn't have those options what it meant. It meant it was harder to get jobs, harder to get an education, harder to get the things you needed for your family. Our job is to right that wrong, to make sure that people really have access to what they deserve. Now, I want to thank so many people who have been a part of this, and you're going to hear from some folks who truly understand the meaning of this new era for this community and other communities in Brooklyn. But I want to say at the beginning a thank you to James Patchett, the president of EDC, and the great work that you and your team have done in getting this ferry service to be a reality. I also want to thank the Senior Vice President of Hornblower, the company that has helped us achieve this goal, Cameron Clark. Thank you so much, and everyone at Hornblower. Another great advocate for the people of Red Hook, I want to thank the president for Red Hook East Residents Association, Frances Brown, for all she has done. Thank you. And a special thank you to our special guests, the students from PS 15 right here in Red Hook. How you doing, guys? And it's going to be great for students and families as well. When these kids want to go on a field trip, now they can take the ferry. They can see so many great things in New York City as part of their education. What does this mean for everyday people in Red Hook? It means they will shave 20 minutes off their ride to Manhattan. Travel time will literally be cut in half, and that will allow for so much more opportunity and a better way of life. It just fundamentally changes people's lives if they can get where they need to go more easily, if they know it's not going to be such a hassle, and if they know it's going to be simple, and those doors of opportunity can open for them. Look, we knew for a long time in this city that Red Hook wasn't getting its fair share. We knew that about the Rockaways as well. The solution was staring us in the face to get back to the water, to use our waterways, to get people where they needed to go more easily, to get around all the congestion on our streets and more in our subways as well. The solution was staring us in the face, but for decades, there wasn't a plan. Now there is, and citywide ferry service is already having a remarkable impact, and it's remarkably popular already, just a few weeks in. Since launching on May 1st, 243,000 people have taken a trip on one of these ferries. That is very high demand, and we're pleased to say it's a pleasant surprise how high demand has been so quickly. And we are going to keep meeting that demand. It's a good problem to have when more and more people are taking ferries even than we expected. You know the old phrase, if you build it, they will come. Well, they are coming in droves. And we're going to keep meeting that demand because it proves people want this option and they need this option. So today, starting tomorrow morning, 6:30 again, a new day for Red Hook, for Sunset Park, for Bay Ridge, new options for the people of hardworking communities, and a new chance to get more deeply connected to everything that the 5 boroughs have to offer. Just a few words in Spanish. El servicio de New York City Ferry llega mañana temprano al sur de Brooklyn. El ferry asegurará que comunidades como Red Hook estén más cerca de las oportunidades que merecen. Con esta ampliación, seguimos avanzando en nuestro plan para un sistema de transporte que funcione para todos los neoyorquinos. With that, eloquent in both English and Spanish, I bring to you a man who represents this community and represents Sunset Park as well and understands very personally what this will mean for the people of the communities he serves, Assemblymember Felix Ortiz.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I've been noticing that you have a thing at the bottom, you know when I have to elevate.
Pretty cool.
So let me just really thank the mayor for this historical and open day and beautiful day for the people of Red Hook. For many, many, many years, I've been representing the people of Red Hook and Sunset Park in Albany. As a result of that, we have been fighting, and the mayor was not wrong about that. We have been fighting to ensure, and I know the mayor since 1980 when he was at the school board. So we have a lot of fight together that we had to face when we was at this in the.
A little later than that, but that's
yeah,
okay.
1980 I came here. 1999 we was at the school board, and I remember the fight that we had to put through all this. And let me tell you this: we cannot divide. We cannot have a highway dividing the community of Red Hook versus the other community. This will bring the bridge that is needed in order to have the people to communicate from one side to another. And I think it's important to recognize what the mayor has continued to do, not just in Red Hook, but throughout the city. I think what he has managed to do throughout the city in the short period of time that he has been in office has demonstrated the things that really can be done, that thing that can really be done and hasn't been done for the last administration when the administration was here, just about commitment, lip service, and the mayor has managed to stand up and do it, and moving forward, and even come to Albany to make sure we do the right thing. And we are here to thank you, Mr. Mayor, for the opportunity that you have given us. I also would like to recognize the kids that are in the back from PS 15, the Summit Academy School that are also there, Ms. Marshall, Ms. Brown, and the board of directors of the East and West who are here with us today, because those are the people, those are the pioneers who has given us the opportunity for us to continue to represent this community with the goodwill. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, again. Thank you.
And now a great champion for folks who are underdogs and have not been given what they deserve, Assemblymember Joanne Simon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm here to share in the great joy that the Red Hook community and all of us feel about the institution of the ferries that we have. You know, for many years, New York's life was centered around the water. And then somehow we started looking inward and forgot about the water around us and what it brought to us and what it could bring to us. And then we had Robert Moses, who cut so many communities off from each other and from the water. And this is a very affirmative step to say, you know, we've been dealt this very bizarre hand with the highways running through our communities, but there is a way to work this out. There is a way to resolve that problem. There's a way to reconnect the communities of Red Hook with other parts of the city and with other parts of Brooklyn. And that disconnect that was furthered and created by driving a highway through the community helped to increase that decline and the lack of transportation, the lack of stores. We had no bank in Red Hook for years. Remember when the bank came in? So we are just so happy that this will make such a difference to reconnect the communities of Red Hook with the rest of New York City and provide them with really viable transportation that's green, that's sustainable, and that will bring us forward into the next century. So thank you very much to everybody who was a part of this, and thank you, Mr. Mayor, for making sure that this happened. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I mentioned after Sandy hit the very horrible impact on this community, I saw so many people suffering, and Carlos Menchaca was there at the front line serving the people of Red Hook. And I remember very vividly walking through Red Hook houses. It was 2 weeks after the storm. There was still no light, no electricity in Red Hook's houses, going up through the stairwells, feeling like we had gone back in time. Everyone here remembers it, went through it, persevered through it, and I appreciate it. And Carlos, you were there at the front line helping people out, so you understand what this community's been through, and now you represent it in the City Council. Councilman Carlos Menchaca.
Mr. Mayor, muchísimas gracias. And we all in Red Hook thank you so much, and your team, who have really brought and continue to bring the new flavors of response for Red Hook. Now, you've heard from so many folks already talk about the needs of Red Hook, and it's this administration that continues to double down on its efforts to ensure that New Yorkers understand that Red Hook is here and that we are a special community. This community has been asking for so many different transportation options, whether it's City Bike that's on the streets of Red Hook, thank you very much, to the new ferry that's on its way. This is an opportunity for us to say thank you to the community as well, because this would have not happened if it weren't for the community that stood up and said, we need it. Now, the Economic Development Corporation also worked with the Port Authority, so we have to say thank you to both of those agencies, because they both have a role to play in this space that we're in right now. So let's give them both a round of applause for working together and making this happen. I'm also told that in the world that we are living in, where the president is saying no to the Paris Agreement and is rumored to be leaving it as an agreement and not speaking for our voices as a community, we're standing up and saying no. This is an incredibly green infrastructure that's here right now in Red Hook. And the big ship, the Queen Mary behind us, is now connected to shore power. So let's give a round of applause to this collective effort that the city of New York is doing right now to ensure that we are resisting in our ways, small and big, against the forces outside of us. We will prevail. Red Hook has more to come, and it's because of this administration and the agencies that are putting every effort. And for that, muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. And finally, we should celebrate. It's a great day for Bay Ridge, Brooklyn as well. And people in Bay Ridge for the longest time have looked across the water, seen how close Lower Manhattan is, and wondered why there couldn't be ferry service. And I've had this conversation with Vinny Gentili more times than I could count. He has been dogged and persistent for a long time, fighting for this day. And Vinny, the day has come. Congratulations to you. Councilman Vinny Gentili.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As others have said, New York is a waterfront that other cities would die for. And it has been my goal and my hope since the day I took office in 2003 to have daily ferry commuter service in the city of New York. And we had it for a while after 9/11 and when it was federally funded. And we had it at the 69th Street Pier in Bay Ridge. And then in 2004, when that federal money ran out, we were trying to convince the city to continue that service. And we had a rally at that pier. And I was joined at that rally by Councilman Bill de Blasio. And we staged the rally with some other councilmen. Councilman de Blasio joined us. And we really put on a show to keep the ferry service running. We didn't win that fight. We could not convince the previous administration of the vision of daily commuter ferry service. And so we did not give up the fight. It's now 14 years later. 14 years later that it took Mayor Bill de Blasio to fulfill that vision and bring us to this day where we will have daily ferry commuter service. And I can't tell you how pleased I am about that and how my constituents in Bay Ridge and Dyker Heights are also. So let me say a word to my constituents in Bay Ridge and Dyker Heights. If you've got the R train blues, and you know what those are, right? And the R in R train stands for rarely. So if you have the R train blues, mosey on down to the 69th Street Pier and join a new way to travel, a new, comfortable, beautiful way to travel on the South Brooklyn Ferry. I want to thank Hornblower. I want to thank EDC and James Patchett for really helping the mayor put this vision together. Mr. Mayor, thank you so very, very much.
Okay, we welcome your questions on this happy day, and then we will be taking questions on a variety of topics. Grace.
You talked about demand and meeting the high demand that is out there for ferry service. There have been long lines. It's not just commuters who are using the ferries, but tourists are trying to use them. So what in the short term is the city doing, can it do to prevent those, in some cases, hour and a half, even 2-hour lines for ferries?
Yeah, we experienced a lot of ridership over the Memorial Day weekend. I think that was a very good thing, but obviously an aberrant thing because it was a long weekend. But the bottom line is we're going to keep adding what we need to make it work. This new line, and James can speak to it, this new line is going to take a lot of pressure off the situation because it's adding new capacity and redundancy. But the bottom line is if we have to keep bringing in more boats to accommodate the need, that's a blessing. I would love to do that. That means more and more people are off the streets, more and more people are out of congested subways and taking advantage of the ferry. So we'll keep meeting the demand.
Sure. So I was specifically the South Brooklyn route will stop here as well as in Brooklyn Bridge Park and then stop in Governor's Island on summer weekends. The biggest ridership that we saw was demand for people going from Brooklyn to Governor's Island. And we did have riders waiting for a long time. Many of them were tourists and just people out for the weekend. Because this new service will provide additional vessels going along that route, we expect that it will decrease the waiting times and the number of folks coming in. Also, as the mayor mentioned, we'll see what happens when we're not on a holiday weekend and we're dealing with a normal level of ridership. We have designed the system to make sense for ordinary ridership, not necessarily for every tourist who comes in on Memorial Day. But as the mayor said, we're looking at additional resources and ways to make sure that everyone is accommodated. And finally, I would just say that we're also looking at some schedule adjustments to make sure that we're timing the way the vessels come into different locations along the route. So, for example, one of the things that we saw was many vessels coming in at one time, and so that just took longer for riders to load. But by shifting the schedules so vessels on different routes are coming in at different times, we'll have the vessels more spread out and therefore shorter waiting times.
Are these boats the right size? I mean, do you feel confident that this is the right size, that there shouldn't be bigger boats in the mix?
I'll start. We believe right now they are the right size, and when we see the whole system come together, we'll get the full picture. But if we need larger boats, we'll make that adjustment. That would be a good thing. That would mean more and more people are using it. So I think in the next few days, as the South Brooklyn line gets going, we'll get a better picture on how things are working. Absolutely ready to add boats of the current size if needed. But if we come to the conclusion in the coming weeks that bigger boats are called for, again, good problem to have. We will move to get those bigger boats. Yes.
Keeping in mind this is a brand new system, a brand new service, what part of the city is evaluating some of the infrastructure leading to the ferry terminals? I know that there is a ferry route, the shuttle in Rockaway,
right.
But are there shuttles for these ferries? And are you taking into account how much ridership those shuttles have? Are they large enough? Do they have enough stops? Those kinds of things.
So it's a great question. The particular concern in the Rockaways from the beginning, and it's just the history of the Rockaways, it's hard to get around even within the Rockaways, was that it would not work without the shuttle service. And I didn't have any disagreement with that. I thought that made a lot of sense and we should just go and do it. So we've done it. To date, I think there's been a solid ridership and we've had the capacity we needed through the shuttles. I think in some other communities, the location of the pier doesn't require as much because there may be existing public transportation or because it's centrally located. We're going to evaluate each situation and see what happens. If we think more shuttles are needed, I'm open to doing it. There would have to be obviously, proof that there was an audience for them. But again, I'm starting from the perspective the whole thing has to work. If people can reach it the way it is and benefit from it, great. If they need a shuttle for it to work properly, then we'll experiment with more shuttles. Yeah.
Yeah, Mayor, just going back to the issue of demand, do you think that Hornblower has enough boats? They've had to charter a boat from a competitor who they beat out for the contract. The city bought out another company's contract and some of their boats. Is this really the most efficient way to be running ferry service if they've got to borrow boats from other people?
Well, I think part of the good challenge here is that these guys came in ahead of schedule, EDC and Hornblower. We started months ahead of when we thought we were going to be starting because they had everything ready. And we knew it would take a while to perfect the approach. But obviously, you're talking about almost 250,000 rides now. Something's working. There's things to improve, but something is working. So I'm glad we started when we started. More boats are coming in all the time. This new line is going to relieve a lot of the pressure on the existing system. So I think it's clear that sometimes we will need more boats because of either a holiday weekend or some particular situation. We need to have the redundancy to do that. Go ahead.
Yeah, I would just say it's one. I mean, the logic of this kind of transportation system is to have the number of vessels that under your control that you need every day, and then to the extent you need to deal with peak circumstances, that would be when you would consider a charter or another alternative. It's very common in transit systems to want to have charters, and because those can be shared by many different users at the same time. So that to buy a vessel that we would only need on certain high demand days like Memorial Day weekend, we'd be having it in the sitting not in use the rest of the time. So it's very natural to complement the services together. And the other thing that I would say is that all of our experts who've launched ferry systems before have said, there's a 30-day period where you wait and see what happens and you just evaluate the system and get it up and running. And that's why we were excited to launch early, and we're really excited about the level of demand we've seen so far.
On that, I mean, the boat was chartered on May 10th or before then, according to a story that we had. So that's obviously not related to the Memorial Day holiday.
Right. Well, but again, so that's just a particular circumstance. So in that case, we had a vessel. So again, it's not uncommon early in a service. We had some vessels that had some small mechanical issues that needed to be repaired. So we chartered a vessel while those were temporarily in the shop. The other thing is, again, we had started we started the service in ownership of the exact number of vessels that we need to run the route. Once we have expansions of the additional routes, we've had 2 more vessels come into the harbor and are up in operations, and then a third one that was actually just started service yesterday. So we've already added 3 additional new vessels to the service since the beginning of the launch. So we currently have 8 in the harbor that are part of the service. We also have 2 that the city that EDC owns and is operating as a part of the service as well. And then we have another 12 vessels that are coming into the harbor over the course of the next year. So it's not that we misestimated the number of vessels that we need. It's that we planned carefully about the number that we need, and when we have specific circumstances, we'll get another vessel where necessary.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm with the local newspaper, and speaking for the community, three things. First, we would like, this is great, and we really appreciate the fact that this location was picked because it wasn't the original location that EDC was interested in doing. It was said to be impossible. We fought for this location, and we love the utilization of the Atlantic Basin. It's wonderful, and I think it's good to, now we have a race, Grand Prix race coming. This is going to be great, and it's in the right place, not in a little vest pocket park. Secondly, there is a lot of parking around here that we'd like to be able, we think that people might want to come from Park Slope to head to Ferry. They may want to park their car and leave it for the day. Maybe something could be worked out with the port authorities, although that is always divisive. And then the third thing is...
You're answering your own questions. I like this.
Well, I'm in the newspaper business. I try to see what's going on. The third thing is we really appreciate the service to Governor's Island. And we hope that if it's utilized enough, you might consider running that all year round too. You have the harbor school. Some people from Red Hook have to go to Manhattan and then take that ferry to go to school. And people who work the same thing. You can see once that ship is gone, you'll see Governor's Island. It's right there.
Yeah.
We would love to be able to go there with a ferry all year round.
So I'll start, and if James wants to add. Look, again, we've said from the beginning, the ferry service and its future will be determined by how much people use it. And the more people use it, the more we'll be ready to add to it. So we have a very aggressive build-out plan this year into next year. I'm very comfortable saying if the ridership keeps growing and growing, then we'll be willing to add routes as needed, add capacity, because we want to get people off the streets. We want to get people out of their cars. We want to get people out of what is unfortunately now very congested subways. We used to be begging people to go to the subways. Now subways are so congested. We'd like this to be another great option for people who can use it. That's good for everyone. But it's all going to be determined by the level of interest. The good news is, boy, people have gotten the message the ferry service exists. That is, and I thank all the members of the media. The word is out there, and people are coming in droves. Yes.
Given the high ridership and the low costs to ride, would you consider charging tourists more, especially given the sort of anecdotal reports that people are getting on for the low price and then essentially with alcohol and everything just have a very low price cruise around New York Harbor?
Tourists are drinking alcohol in New York City? I was not told about this.
Would you consider charging tourists more?
Look, we would look at any option, but I would say at the outset, it's not easy to do, and I think it comes with some downsides too. I think we are always thrilled that tourists come here in the numbers they do, and the impact. We appreciate the impact they have on our economy. I think the more essential question is making sure that we have what it takes to run the service the way we want to run it. So. Consider it, yes, but I don't think it's likely.
You mentioned earlier the possibility of adding larger boats. Given how long it took these boats to be built and the cost to the city to build them, do you know when that would be decided and how long that would happen, how long it would take, and then where the money would come for larger boats?
I'll start, and James will jump in. So, this is the next expansion. We started a few weeks ago with the Rockaways. We're expanding here with South Brooklyn. There's an expansion coming up in August with a Queens line. We're going to get a really good picture quickly of the level of demand and what it means in terms of the size of the boats. I wouldn't be surprised if the best answer is more of these boats. And we can, obviously, the template is there. We can keep having them produced for us. But it is conceivable that bigger boats would make sense. We'll have that information basically in the course of the next few months as we see the real-life ridership.
Sure. I mean, I think it can, in terms of timing, you also asked about that. If depending on what we see, it is conceivable we could have new solutions in place by next year, just because we currently have vessels under construction. We're looking at possibilities of expanding their capacity, which is an option because they're already under construction and they're scheduled to come out of the shipyard. But we have to look at all of the options. Also, to the question that was asked earlier, that's part of the reason why we're supplementing with charters right now, because to make a decision to invest in additional vessels based on the experience of literally 1 month of just 2 lines running would be a mistake. Instead, what we're doing is we're evaluating all of the circumstances. We know we have additional routes. The South Brooklyn service is starting now. As I mentioned, it's going to be directly accommodating the passengers, many of whom were the ones who were creating the large lines last weekend. And secondly, the Long Island City route is also going to be coming down and taking much of the burden off of the East River Ferry route because of the fact that a lot of people from Long Island City will be able to take that route instead. So again, it's a mix, and also it has to be a thoughtful process as we roll this system out and make sure that we understand and are accommodating all of the needs of New Yorkers.
Before the holiday weekend, there were some issues with boats and mechanical issues that caused delays. Could you elaborate on what those issues were and how they're going to be addressed, or if new boats are going to have same problems, things like that?
Sure, absolutely. Well, the good news is, we had some minor mechanical issues. The average, I would say they were out for a couple of days of service. Many of the vessels that we brought into the harbor were out for 24, 48 hours. Our maritime experts say that's actually very common. You start running a vessel, you put it into a stress system where it has a lot of ridership. It's stopping and starting all the time. That's what happens with new vessels. That's why you supplement with charters. But the good news is, of the new vessels that we've started, we haven't had any of those issues because we saw them, we knew what they were, we corrected them in the shipyard before they were brought up to New York City. And the vessels, since they have been brought back into service, none of them have gone back out of service. So again, this is just part of the experience of rolling out a new system, starting it early and experiencing a lot of ridership.
There's reduced frequency, reduced service.
Just a little louder.
There's reduced service on the weekends when, at least this far, demand seems to be as high or higher than during the week. Why did you do reduced service on the weekends, and are you going to change that?
So I'll start and pass to James. I mean, obviously Memorial Day weekend was a particular weekend with particular dynamics. But I think, it's the same broad rubric. We're willing to make adjustments as we go along because we want to accommodate the ridership. Even to the point about tourists, I'd like those tourists off the roads and out of the subways and on the water. So we're going to keep making those adjustments as we go along. Just anything generically about weekend schedules, and are we?
Oh, sure.
Are they too low for what the ridership is?
Oh, sure. Well, again, it's all a mix. I just reiterate again, this service will also be running along the same lines that we're creating a massive amount of demand. So we had one weekend where we had extremely high demand. That weekend was Memorial Day weekend, which is a long weekend, obviously a holiday weekend, a lot of people in town and taking time off. And yet, it was also when we just had one line running to Governor's Island. So we will see what happens on a regular weekend when we have this additional line up in service, and we'll be able to say more then.
Mayor, the cruise terminal behind you has struggled. It's lost a lot of cruise traffic in recent years. Do you see this ferry stop as potentially an enhancement that will draw more cruise lines to come back and use this facility again?
I'll tell you, I'm not an expert on the situation with the cruise ships. I'm not sure I'd assume that, honestly, and I don't know what the history is of the challenges they've faced. James will speak to it, but look, we did this for the people of Red Hook. That's the sole strategic imperative. People who didn't have the kind of transportation they deserved, and the city of New York could do something about it. That's why we did it, not referencing the cruise ship situation.
Yeah, I think specifically about the cruise operations, we actually just last week announced a new joint operator for the Manhattan and Brooklyn cruise terminals. And the thing that's important about that is what we heard from the industry is having integrated operations is what's going to make the Brooklyn cruise terminal more successful. And they're investing capital right in this terminal because they think there's opportunity. So, we're working closely with the local council member to make sure that's done in an environmentally friendly way.
Any plans for ferry service in Coney Island?
So that is part of the larger discussion of where we go after this first set of lines open up. We've got the Queens line opening in August. We've got the Soundview line in the Bronx opening up in the first half of 2018. We're going to keep building out. I've heard people in Coney Island asking about ferry service, people in the South Shore of Staten Island, people in eastern Queens, northeastern Queens. We're going to look at all those. But we need to see how this first set of lines goes to decide what kind of expansion we should do. If this ridership is really strong, that encourages going farther. If it's not as strong as we want it to be, that doesn't. It's as simple as that, because it's a major investment. So that's a decision we would make after we see the full build out over this next few months. Okay.
Just to follow
Please.
up, what's the prerequisite?
Say again?
Just
What's the prerequisite?
Where each location?
I'll start. James will be more expert, but to some extent it was where we knew there was existing high levels of demand, right? So we were looking at everything along the East River on both sides of the East River. We had a good sense from the previous service, but we knew that there was huge growth going on the Brooklyn part of the East River waterfront and the Queens part that wasn't being served sufficiently with the previous ferry service. We knew it just because we saw so much development, so many more jobs coming in, it just made sense. We knew then there were historically underserved areas, Red Hook, the Rockaways, Soundview, and the Bronx. Unquestionably, places that did not have enough mass transit options were right there on the waterfront. We had an obvious and easy way to do something about it. We've got to see then, again, depending on ridership, and we also knew all of these places we expected strong ridership. And that's based on whatever, previous information we had. There was ferry service in the Rockaways for a period of time, for example. That was something we could base it on. But I think the next big jump really will be based on if this model works, then it's worth going farther. And that's something we'll know, literally within a year's time. Thank you. We're doing media questions. Buddy Scotto, you're wonderful, but we're only doing media questions right now. I'll take your question afterwards, though. Can never run away from Buddy. Any other media questions on this before we go to the topics? Yes?
Okay, so other than taking this ferry behind you to work, what incentives would you have for civil servants, police, fire, our teachers, to take this beautiful boat here, or even jump on a train? What ideas do you have in terms of...
It's a good question, but we haven't looked at it, to the best of my knowledge, we haven't looked at it that way so far. We've looked at it the way we look at all transportation, and we're creating an opportunity that we think a lot of people will want to take as is. So it's a perfectly fair question, but unless I'm missing something, that hasn't been the way we've considered it. We'll look at all options in the future, but that's just not been on the table so far.
In your negotiations with the teachers,
No.
or this or that?
No. Any other questions on this? All right, want to see, just in the interest of symmetry, if we have any questions about the climate change accord and what President Trump is starting to do or possibly going to do. Let me see if there's any questions on that. Please.
A day in mind this week of when you'll be signing it, and will you sign it whether or not he makes an announcement, the president makes an announcement that he'll be
Look, we have already set down a series of policies that we're acting on. I think the executive order becomes more important if he pulls away from the Paris Accord. So we're going to look to see what happens this week and what he specifically says. We'll make a determination based on that. Let's see if there's any questions on the climate change situation. Okay, let's go to other topics. Other topics.
It is also a national issue. Just across the river, we have a primary coming up next week, the New Jersey governor's race. A lot of national figures, including Vice President Joe Biden, have weighed in with their endorsements. Are you endorsing a candidate in the New Jersey primary?
I have no plans to. Yes.
Mayor, I have a question about the murder of a man who was staying in a transitional housing facility that's run by the state and BRC, which is a nonprofit that also runs some city shelters. Sort of a multi-part question, but the first part is that he was murdered and his family wasn't notified for nearly a week. His family found out about it by reading an article in the newspaper about his death. The NYPD said this was due to a communications error. Is this something that's troubling you? Is there something in effect to try to stop this from happening?
Yeah, that's very rare. It is troubling, but it's very rare. Obviously, God forbid something like this occurs, but then the NYPD comes in to investigate, and typically there's a pretty tight protocol about how to find family members, particularly before the information is made public. So I'm surprised that happened. I don't want that ever to happen to any family, and my condolences to them for sure. BRC, the city has had a very good experience with in general. I don't know the details of what happened here. It's obviously a tragedy, and it's something All of us in each of the state system, as you said, this is part of. We have a city system. We all are working to try and make shelters safer. In the case of the city system, by having the NYPD now directly supervise the security, which was not true for a quarter century. Now it is true that the NYPD is directly training shelter security staff and supervising them in the city shelters. I don't know what the state protocol is, but that's how we're handling it in the city shelters.
This particular shelter, I mean, this man was stabbed by his roommate who had knives with him. There are no metal detectors in these state shelters. Obviously, city residents are sometimes sent through DHS to these kinds of shelters because they have certain qualifying characteristics or illness or things like that. Are you concerned about the level of security in state shelters, state-run shelters, and do you think that they should explore having metal detectors?
I don't know enough about the state shelters and what their security protocol is. Again, I know what we've done. We brought the NYPD in to supervise and to train staff, and we make determinations depending on the shelter what kind of security measures are needed. I don't know how the state does it, so I can't comment on that. We're obviously willing to and happy to work with the state in any way cooperatively, but I just can't comment on their approach because I don't know it.
Given the events in Times Square a couple of weeks ago where motorists were thrown down, are you giving any consideration to the idea of making Times Square regardless, having what already exists, the pedestrian zone on Rockaway to 7th Avenue?
I would not say we're considering that at this moment. I would say we are considering any and all security measures needed to strengthen the situation in Times Square. This is an ongoing conversation I'm having with Commissioner O'Neill. A lot has been done over the years to fortify Times Square. Obviously, a huge police precinct. There's a police headquarters there and a huge presence, including our CRC members. A lot of physical measures have been put in place. We're going to be making additional moves in Times Square to further security there, but I don't think at this moment we're considering taking all traffic out of it.
So, Mayor, just wanted to clarify your participation in the Puerto Rican Day Parade. Do you actually support the parade's decision to honor Oscar Lopez Rivera?
Look, the parade committee made a decision. I don't know the specifics of their thought process. I wasn't a part of that. I think what's happened here is the underlying issue has been lost, which is the situation of Puerto Rico today. And I hope, despite this controversy, we can get this conversation back to what I believe they were trying to highlight, which is the extraordinarily unfair way Puerto Rico is being treated by the United States government right now. And we see the facts where Puerto Rico is losing its doctors and its professionals, its health system is falling apart. The mistakes made in the past related to Puerto Rico are really coming to bear now, and yet there is not a sufficient effort to help Puerto Rico get back on its feet. That's what this discussion should be about. So, again, they made a decision about one of a number of people to honor. I think there's also been something that has not been well reported. They chose a whole list of different types of people to honor. There's a separate person who's the Grand Marshal. I think there's been a certain amount of misunderstanding here. But the issue should be about Puerto Rico today. That's the bottom line.
Do you support the decision to...
Again, I'm not going to get into parsing what they did. I believe the parade is about Puerto Rico.
But do you just fundamentally, do you support the decision to honor Oscar Lopez Rivera in the parade?
Again, it could be a yes or no to you, but it's not to me, because the parade committee has its own approach. I believe they were trying to focus attention on the situation in Puerto Rico. They did it in a particular way. It unfortunately has not led to a debate over the future of Puerto Rico. It's led to a different kind of controversy. I think that's very unfortunate. But the issue should be about what's going on in Puerto Rico now.
Given the distraction that you think it's become, should they withdraw his participation from the parade to refocus?
That's something they have to decide. That's the honest truth.
Mayor, the drumbeat of people.
Louder, please.
The drumbeat of people asking you not to march continues unabated. Yesterday, the son of somebody who died at Francis Tavern said that it was unseemly for the mayor of the city that was attacked on 9/11 to march with somebody who was perceived as having terrorist ties. I wonder what you say to him about your decision to march with Oscar.
I say to him that I am very sorry for what he went through, and I think violence is wrong in all its forms, but I'm not marching with this individual. And I think that's an absolute misstatement of what's going on here. This is a parade with a lot of people that the committee decided to include in the parade. I'm not there because of who they decided to include. I'm there for the Puerto Rican people, period. No, and I've never said I would, and I don't even know, but respectfully, if that's never, ever been said, why there was an assumption of that, because it's never been the case.
Other people other than Oscar Lopez?
I never was going to march with him. No one's ever bothered to ask it. I would have easily clarified it. I traditionally march with either elected officials or other members of the city government.
Who will you be marching with this year?
I don't know. Okay, others. In the back? My back?
Mr. Mayor, on voting and election reform, you had an announcement right after the presidential primary.
Yep.
You said it was going to be a major priority. We haven't really heard much from you on that since. Governor Cuomo, same thing. He says he wants election voting reform. We don't hear anything from him on that. It's super hasty. What's going on with that? There's only about 3 weeks left in the session.
Well, you know plenty about Albany, and this is when things start to happen. So we're about to launch a major effort on that front because I think people really want electoral reform in this state, and there's a chance to do it, and it's about creating the pressure needed to achieve it. So we're going to be doing a lot in the next few weeks on it.
With the governor on that?
If the governor wants to work on that, I would certainly work with anyone who wants to achieve electoral reform. Yeah.
2 questions on the parade. I'll do one at a time. Lorraine Cortez Vasquez is your senior advisor. She's also the chairwoman of the parade. Were you or others at City Hall informed ahead of time that the parade was going to honor Oscar Lopez?
No.
The second question is, the sponsors point out that the parade is in financial difficulty. Will the city be giving any money to help the parade? Or will any city staffers be assigned to help the parade organize?
No.
2 questions. On the budget negotiations over legal services funding, are you in favor of providing lawyers for all NYCHA tenants or just the ones that are entering housing for it? And the second question, given the fact that the state attorney general and the governor had both been looking at fair work week related issues or scheduling issues, on-call issues for months and in the attorney general's case even years, did you consult with either of their offices before putting together the legislation that you signed?
I didn't personally. Our team has been working on this for months. A lot of you were there when we were in front of I think it was the McDonald's in downtown Brooklyn. I believe that goes back to September or something like that. So my team's been working with a really extensive array of stakeholders ever since. I don't know if there were conversations with the Attorney General's office or the Governor's office. I'm very, very proud of the Fair Workweek legislation. I think it goes at a fundamental problem in our society that was unaddressed previously, and that's why we had to do it. If it was covered by state law or federal law, we wouldn't have had to do it, but it needed to be done because people were being put through an outrageous situation.
Reports coming from the Daily News that they're looking at in Albany some legislation that would preempt or roll back some of what you just passed yesterday.
Look, I am never surprised by anything that happens at the state or federal level, but if people in Albany really want to say to tens of thousands of low-wage workers that they can't have fair schedules and they can't take their kids to the doctor and they can't take care of their own health and all, I'll have that fight any day. This was necessary legislation. If it had been done at the state level or the federal level, that would have been great. It wasn't. It had to happen. And so now if they attempt in any way to interfere with it, we will fight that. It's as simple as that.
Just to go back to the question about the funding for legal defense.
No, our plan is exactly as we've stated, working with the City Council. It's for New Yorkers who make up to $50,000 and are going to housing court. That's the specific plan.
Mr. Mayor, can you understand though the objections of people who might not want to see the mayor of the city of New York march in the parade that honors a man who headed up the FALN and which is an organization?
Yeah, of course I can, Rich. And look, I think again, this situation, we've lost the meaning of what I believe the parade committee was trying to do. I believe they were trying to focus attention on the situation of Puerto Rico today. That didn't happen. That's the honest God's truth. It didn't happen. The conversation has become about something very different, and I think that's very unfortunate. I certainly understand why so many people are upset. I know that's not what the parade committee intended, and I also know that the parade is bigger than this one individual. It's just as simple as that.
How do you know what the parade committee intended?
Because I've heard enough of what people have said on that committee to know that they were trying to focus on the crisis in Puerto Rico. And I think they thought it was a way to do it, but obviously it has not been.
Strike you that this is a very odd way to focus on the crisis in Puerto Rico?
I think it didn't work.
Spoken to members of the parade committee? Have you tried to intervene to convince them to make a change or an adjustment?
Look, again, you have to understand that they are, I think, feeling right now, I can't speak for them, but I think they're feeling very pained on the situation in Puerto Rico. I think they were trying to draw attention to it. I don't think their intention was to have all this happen. They have to make their own decision. It's as simple as that. They have to make their own decision. I don't think this has been portrayed in its fullness because, again, they honored a whole host of people. They did not make it about this one person only. The media has made it about this one person only. It's much more going on here. But this is also about a parade that is, representing 700,000 people in this city and a moment where their homeland is going through a horrific situation. That's what this should be about.
I don't know if you heard my question, but have you intervened at all? Have you reached out to the parade organizers?
I think they know my views. I'll say it that way.
When the parade works for you, what conversations have you had with her on this topic?
I'm not going to go into that. Again, I have great respect for Lorraine, but this decision was made totally separate from her own administration. As I mentioned earlier, did not know the decision had been made until it was already public. And again, respect her, but the committee's got to look at the situation and make their own decisions. So I think we've covered it. Go ahead.
Mayor, on the same day as the parade in Puerto Rico, when you're talking about what's going on in Puerto Rico today, there's going to be a plebiscite where people can vote on whether they want statehood, commonwealth, or independence. Have you taken a position on that? No. And do you know that when you talk about Puerto Rico today, Oscar Rivera is supporting independence, and there are others who are saying that this parade is being hijacked by people who support statehood. I'm wondering what your feelings are about that and the tensions that are rolling in the Puerto Rican community about what should happen to the island.
I don't think it's my place to tell the Puerto Rican people what they should do. But I do think it's fair to say that right now the United States government is not doing what it should be doing for 3.5 million Americans. That's the one thing I feel very comfortable saying. The status quo was created by the United States government. They changed policies towards Puerto Rico that gutted the economy. By the way, once upon a time, those policies helped the Puerto Rican economy, so we have to look at the full history. But they changed policies years ago that fundamentally hurt the economy. As a health crisis ensued, as a financial crisis ensued, the United States government didn't step in. That's what we should be focusing our attention. My attention's on Washington right now. Why is Washington not addressing the crisis? The people of Puerto Rico got to decide what status they want. Thanks, everyone.